It's a Tuesday night, so you know what that means. It's time to discuss all things Quinnipiac sports. North Dakota took a trip across the country to the People's United Center and took on the Bobcats men's ice hockey team. Men's soccer goalie Jared Mazzola is back after a 2-month absence, and preseason men's and women's basketball standings were announced. All this and more starting now. Welcome to Studio 125. I'm your host, Joey O'Donoghue. Alongside me, I have Connor Core and John Surratt. Boys, how are we feeling tonight?
Well, I'm super excited to go on with you for your first time, Connor. How are you feeling tonight?
I'm feeling pretty good, feeling pretty confident, did a lot of homework, and I'm ready to debate some Quinnipiac sports.
Well, you better be confident. Let's get right into it.
Love to hear that. This past week, the Bobcats faced off twice against North Dakota, tying that series 1-1. The Bobcats swept the ice on Friday, winning 5-2, but Saturday, the Fighting Hawks took the dub. John, in your opinion, who actually won this series?
So, Connor, I'm going to start off and say that I think North Dakota won this series. Now, I know it's just tough for, Quinnipiac hadn't played with fans in the stadium for who knows how long, 601 days to be exact, though. And really, they came out firing 1-5-2, but then that's tough for North Dakota to really come back and win, traveling across the country. And so for Quinnipiac, then they lost the day after 3-1. So, it showed that they had the resilience and were able to fight back in the next game. So that's why I think North Dakota is still against a top 5 team in a home crowd environment like Quinnipiac. I think that's why they came away with the win at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, John, I'm going to have to disagree with you. First disagreement of the night. I think Quinnipiac won this debate. Although North Dakota is playing number 5 Quinnipiac, well, now newly ranked number 5 Quinnipiac, that's just a little taste of what they had for the rest of the season. They're playing number 11 Denver, number 4 Minnesota Duluth twice in the season, number 7 Minnesota, number 1 Cloud State, just to name a few. And arguably, the beginning of their season was the hardest of the season for Quinnipiac. They played in the Icebreakers tournament against Northeastern and Boston College, and they only lost one game, and that was to North Dakota, 1-3. They tied the other games against Vermont, and this is really the hardest game that they're going to have the whole season. They're only playing 2 more ranked teams this entire season, so this might be arguably the beginning of their season was arguably one of the hardest schedules, and yeah, I think you're wrong, actually. So I think Quinnipiac won this series.
I mean, I definitely can see your point there. Like, they really did show out in that first game after beating Vermont as well, and then won tonight too against Holy Cross, most likely. So, they're showing why they're ranked number 5. I just think with North Dakota having to come across the country like that, it's tough. And if Quinnipiac ended up sweeping, which didn't end up happening, I think, it would have been more of a toss-up to see, but I think North Dakota getting that one win, and pretty handedly too, I think that they came away with the win. But I can definitely see your point.
Yes.
With the hockey season in full effect, what Bobcat did you see step up this past weekend as they faced a strong North Dakota team who's ranked 6th in the nation? Connor, let's go to you first.
Well, John, I'm going to have to pick the man in between the posts, sophomore goalie Yaniv Peretz. There's been a lot of speculation, on this show of who is the better goalie to choose between Yaniv Peretz and Dylan St. Cyr, but I'm going to have to go with Yaniv Peretz. He solidified his spot in the home opener as the number 1 goalie moving forward in the season. Peretz proved himself in the home opener, not playing, like you said, with fans in this stadium in 601 days, and it truly showed that he is the future of Quinnipiac sports. Quinnipiac ice hockey, I should say. And he showed up and showed out against 6th-ranked North Dakota.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go with Oliver Chow. I mean, he ended up, he scored 2 goals in the first game against North Dakota and then got the assist in the second game. Coming over from UMass as a grad student, I do think that he's going to provide a lot of depth and a lot of scoring that this team can need. Yaniv, I definitely can agree with that point too, but I think Oliver Chow definitely showed why he can help this Bobcats team reach heights that they've never reached before. And so, I just think that's why Oliver really is going to show out for this Bobcats team throughout the season. I mean, when you look at the roster in general, he's going to have to fill spots that they've never had before.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they go up against teams like North Dakota or other highly ranked teams, he's going to show why that him coming over is going to bring them to possibly a national championship.
Yeah, I agree with your point on Chow, but I have to go with stick with goalkeeper Yaniv Peretz. And like I was saying, he showed up and showed out against North Dakota, and it's one of those things where he stepped up to the plate and he hit a home run again in the home opener for North Dakota for the Bobcats.
Due to COVID and the shortened season last year, Ivy League schools did not compete in play, but this year is different as all schools are back in action. Connor, do you think this is an advantage or disadvantage for the Bobcats as Ivies haven't played in 2 years?
Yeah, so I'm going to have to say this is the advantage for the Bobcats. Like you said before, Ivy Leagues did not play or practice during the fall, winter, or spring this season. And the women's hockey team played this past season, even though there was a COVID year. And it's one of those things where they made it all the way to the ECAC semifinals against Colgate last season, and Colgate went on to win the ECAC championship game. And they're playing the highest competition last season, even in a COVID year, like I mentioned. And the advantage is to them as they need to play these Ivy League schools moving forward, like Yale and Brown and Harvard, like you see on your screen right here.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to agree with you. I think at the beginning of the season, it's going to be the advantage for Quinnipiac. I think the talent's going to show for the Ivy League schools throughout the season, but I do think Quinnipiac having played those games is physically more adapt to the environment that they're going to be coming into, especially with players getting another year due to COVID and them coming back. I do think that at the beginning of the year when they start playing these teams in ECAC hockey play, it'll come down to them having more stamina and more just overall ability. But then once the talent really starts to show and both teams start to get that even level between Ivy Leagues and Quinnipiac, I do think it's going to show out to the end of the year why Ivy League still, Colgate, Harvard, Cornell, we talked about all those teams and why they're still up in the USCHO polls with Quinnipiac as well, placing 8th. And I do think at the end of the day, at the beginning of the year, Quinnipiac's going to show that last season paid dividends, but then throughout the season, the Ivy League schools are going to show, why they have more talent and why they were beating Quinnipiac the previous years.
Yeah, and I definitely think it was definitely the advantage for a lot of schools and a lot of athletes specifically with the NCAA giving them that 5th year due to COVID. And it helped a lot of the grad students moving forward to give them an extra year to prepare for. Hopefully the professional ranks are even overseas with international plays. But I do agree with you that the advantage is to the Bobcats moving forward, even if it's down the road where it might get a little more dicey. But I do have faith in the ice hockey team.
Yeah, we'll just have to see, but I do think we're both in agreement there.
Both the Quinnipiac women's and men's hockey teams have showcased their abilities on the ice this year. The men's team is ranked 5th in the nation, and the women's team has yet to lose a game. John, in your opinion, who is the team to watch this season?
So I mean, you could take this 2 different routes in my opinion, but I'm going to go with men's hockey just because when you look at men's hockey has the pedigree and has the reputation across the nation about how dominant they are, and women's hockey is held under expectations the past few years. Really not a ton of NCAA tournament experience. Well, Quinnipiac's gotten that, made it last year, even as a at-large bid, didn't even win the AC hockey tournament. So I do think at the end of the day, when you look at it, 5th in the nation versus 8th in the nation, talking about women's ice hockey, I get that women's ice hockey hasn't lost a game, but against Providence, they did tie those 2 games. And Quinnipiac, when you just kind of watch both teams play, women's hockey has definitely dominated throughout this season. But besides Providence, they've had to not play the best competition. Quinnipiac's already came out right away and played North Dakota, so I do think it's going to be men's ice hockey this season. But I could see why women's ice hockey would be the team to watch, just because they have gotten to a good start so far, and if they keep showing it, they can be a team to watch for going in.
John, I have one word for you. Guess what that is?
I have no idea. So.
Undefeated. Women's ice hockey is 6-0-2. They haven't lost, but they have but they have 2 ties. So that's why I'm going to go with women's ice hockey. They have 3 good goalies to choose from on any given night to secure that wins for them. And the offensive forwards for them have been dominating with getting shots off. You know that Cash Turner loves to do quantity over quality. Sooner or later, if you keep pounding on that wall, the floodgates are going to open and they're going to start scoring a lot of goals. So that's why I'm going with women's ice hockey. I agree with all your points of why men's ice hockey, but agree to disagree.
I mean, yeah, like, again, I totally get why women's ice hockey, they've gotten off to a ridiculous good start, but when you come down to it, who's going to, at the end of the day, have the chance to me, win it all? And I think Quinnipiac has men's ice hockey has the better shot to win it all than women's ice hockey.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I do agree, yes.
Now it's time for our first break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back as we discuss men's and women's basketball and much more. Stay tuned.
Multiple studies have shown that marijuana can slow both driver reaction
and response time, which can be really dangerous. It's here. It's here. Wait. What? I can't drive. Why? My. Oh.
When we adopt a shelter pet, we discover they're a unique mix of all kinds of things.
Come on, Jules, spot on this last one. There it is. Keep going with it. Leo.
They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love.
Maybe you can make retirement happen. After all, you made home ownership happen. Homeschooling yourself on loans, beefing up your credit score.
So I'm pre-approved.
You were like, yes! Sorry. Color coding listings, ticking boxes, and flushing every toilet in a 20-mile radius. Home sweet home. You aced house hunting. Now get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
I know what you're thinking. I need a job.
I need a new career.
Well, I've been there.
I've been there.
I've been there. I wasn't happy with what I was doing.
After high school, I didn't have a plan.
I just wanted to start working.
I got laid off twice, but you gotta keep going.
You just need the right skills. Find an apprenticeship.
I found a 2-year IT program.
I found a medical course online.
I'm now a consultant in the tech space.
You have more options than you think. You can do this.
You will find something.
You will find something new.
Welcome back, everyone. The shot clock is winding down as it's almost basketball season. Last Tuesday, the preseason ranking for men's and women's basketball was announced. Men's basketball was ranked 9th out of the 11 teams in the MAC. John, do you agree with this sentiment, even with Kevin Marfo back in the Bobcats lineup?
You know, Connor, I just heavily disagree with the preseason MAC. Last year they were predicted much higher and they did finish 8th. However, when you look at the team overall, they definitely got better from last year. And the MAC, when you look at the MAC overall, besides Iona, which is just top-tier talent, top-tier coaching, they can get in higher levels of conferences with Rick Pitino coaching and other players coming in. But when you look at the rest of the rosters in the MAC, St. Peter's, Marist, Fairfield, teams that have competed last year, I do think Quinnipiac's bringing in talent and bringing back talent that Baker Dunleavy's never had, and overall a rotation that he's never had. When you look at the guards, Desi Jones, Bernie Blunt, Louise Courtright, Timmy Shinnery, every player on that team can fill a role that is needed to win in the MAC. And Kevin Marfo coming back. Last year, when he was last time in Quinnipiac, he had a better net efficiency rating than Seth Pinkney by 0.5. But last year's team struggled heavily offensively. And when you look at defensively, yes, they were better, but than the season prior. But this last year, I do think overall, Marfo led the country in rebounds. You can't replace that, and they couldn't. And this year they're getting that back, plus with Rigoni and everyone returning. I do think that they'll end up as a top 3 to 4 team at the end of the day.
Yeah, John. Like I said in A block, I'm gonna have to disagree.
Okay.
They are gonna. I feel
Let's
like
get into it.
It is about the right spot with ranking at number 9. To me, this is only my first year, so I haven't looked too deep in the team. But for me, they haven't found a solidified number 1 scorer. Like last year, Jacob Rigoni just came back with scoring 11.8 points per game, and coming back with his 5th year due to the NCAA, like we mentioned earlier. And they have role players but like I said earlier, they haven't found that solidified number 1. And I could argue with me. What do you think?
Okay,
Right,
do you know Cam Young? Do you know who Cam Young? No. Okay, so he scored 53 points in one game. He was their leading scorer. They didn't win a game in the MAC tournament. So this team, I believe, doesn't need to rely on a top scorer. When you look at the MAC overall, there's not a lot of top scorers. When we look at the team overall, there's not a lot of just teams overall in the MAC. The past few years when Rich Kelly was their main guy, that wasn't a successful team either. I do think when Quinnipiac men's basketball plays, they need to have better passing, better efficiency, and overall just better team play in order to win in the MAC. And they've always had a top scorer and never won prior. So I do think this year with more depth, they'll come back and be a top team that we've expected the past few years.
Note taken.
Connor, you might be too young to know about Kevin Marfos. That's the first time in my life I'll agree with John Surratt. But meanwhile, women's basketball was ranked first in the preseason rankings. Connor, do you think the Bobcats will live up to these expectations or flop under the pressure?
I think they will exceed expectations, John. I was fortunate enough to go to the Women's Basketball Media Day on Monday, and last year's Player of the Year, Mackenzie Deweese, said this: "No pressure, used to it. It's an expectation. Preseason does not mean anything when it comes to March. It's more of a respect aspect." With the confidence that came out of Mackenzie's mouth during the press conference really gave me confidence in this team to not flounder under the preseason polls, but exceed the expectations, win the MAC championship, and make a deep run in the NCAA playoff tournament like they did in 2016, make it to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you. The thing is, exceeding expectations, they were picked number 1. I think they're going to hit that. You're bringing back 3 of the top 3 players that were picked all MAC preseason team, 2 in first team in Mackenzie Deweese, Michaela Morris, and then Rose Cavalry on third team. And you bring back Trish Fabry when I get into my final roar, one of the best coaches in just all time and really in every program. So the respect this Quinnipiac women's basketball team has gotten over the years is why that I do think they're going to end up hitting the top of the MAC at the end of the day. And they did flounder last year, but I do think they'll have a rebound this year with all this roster turnover that Trish has had over the years. I do think this season, with these players coming back, will just pay dividends, and I think that they'll end up hitting the MAC, winning the MAC, and what the preseason polls predicting as well.
Yeah, exactly. And head coach Trisha Fabry also said the preseason poll is more of a respect aspect. Like, she appreciated that they weren't that they weren't ranked number 1, but they know each and every day they've had 20 practices so far that each day, as long as they become 1% better, as of right now, they're already 20% better than they were at the beginning of training camp. So I'm looking forward to seeing this basketball season, and like you said, hopefully they end up the way they are in the preseason polls.
Last year, the Bobcats' number 1 seeded men's soccer team lost to Monmouth in the MAC championship game 1-0. This past Saturday, the Bobcats redeemed themselves with a win on their home turf. Let's take a look at what soccer beat reporter Ben Kane had to say as he witnessed the Bobcats and Hawks duke it out on the field.
The ball starts off in the hands of the Niagara goalkeeper. He punts it up, finds his striker very comfortably. The striker drops back into his own half, but is pressured very well by Jared Smith, who ends up winning the ball back and slipping through Alexander Shakshida. The ball's just a bit too far in front of him, and he gives up on the play. However, the goalkeeper, seeing that there's only a few minutes left, takes a few extra seconds to time waste before falling on the ball. But take a look at this again. As the ball's punted up, I'm going to highlight the Niagara striker here. Just look at the amount of space that player is in. He has 5 Bobcats at least that could be tracking him, but they're all just kind of watching and reacting to the play rather than being proactive and already marking their man. In a system like this with a 3-5-2 formation, what would really work well here is a sweeper-stopper kind of system on these goal kicks or punts, where the likes of Alex Hawley or Dejan Duric act as the stopper and they drop in to defend that striker, or the likes of Luke Allen or Henry Weigand end up stepping up and those midfield 2 players drop in. But we don't see this as the striker wins the ball, but Jared Smith once again does very well, slips through Sheikh. But another thing I want to highlight here is this is the 86th minute, and you have the likes of your striker stopping and kind of just watching, giving up on the play. In a game when it's so close and it's just 1 goal, you want him to keep pushing forward. However, he doesn't do that, and the keeper ends up sitting nicely on the ball.
John, what was the difference in this game compared to last year's MAC championship?
Yeah, Connor, I do think that this game against Monmouth, I mean, Quinnipiac, honestly, they had as much stake as possibly last year's MAC championship game, while Monmouth didn't. Monmouth is solidified into the MAC playoffs, while Quinnipiac is not, because of just how much they've floundered so far throughout this year. Now, they are in the playoffs at the moment, but I do think Monmouth, being number 2 at the moment, they still wanted to win, of course. But the stakes weren't as high, and I think that with Quinnipiac winning that game and Mazzola coming back, and just overall, when you watch the game, they just showed more aggression, and they kind of beat Monmouth last year, like they did, or they beat Monmouth this year like Monmouth did beat them last year in the same fashion with a game-winning goal near the end of the game. And I do think, at the end of the day, this is going to bring a confidence boost for this men's soccer team, but I don't think it's going to progress them to the top of the MAC once the MAC playoffs do come around. If they do end up making it, they still have to do that.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Obviously, like we mentioned earlier, they lost last year in the MAC championship 0-1 to Monmouth, but after the press conference after Niagara, when they lost 3-2, Eric DeCosta said that throughout the week they were going to do a lot of soul searching, and I feel like they did that because obviously coming into the game, Monmouth was ranked number 1 in the MAC standings, and Quinnipiac was ranked near the bottom, and they showed up and showed out, like I mentioned earlier with men's ice hockey, and the score very easily could have been 4-1. The Bobcats missed on 2 penalty kicks opportunities by Brock Austin and Paulo Suarez. And it wasn't like in the MAC championship last year, it wasn't a different roster wise with Quinnipiac, but they just moved a lot of pieces around. And a lot of it for this Quinnipiac team is mental aspect game, because like everyone's been mentioning, that it was a lot of a confidence boost for the Quinnipiac Bobcats as they play these last 3 games against Fairfield, Manhattan, and St. Peter's. And this boost of confidence might just push them into the MAC playoffs first time. And like I said earlier, it was just the mental aspect for Quinnipiac. Like we mentioned, they started 5-0, and then they had that blunder of a few games, and then hopefully this Monmouth game is the boost they need to get into the MAC playoffs and make a deep run into those playoffs.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, this Fairfield game tomorrow is going to play a big matchup for both teams to see if they make the playoffs. So we'll see.
Jared Mazzola logged the full 90 minutes this past Saturday in that win against Monmouth. Connor, do you think the return of Mazzola was the key factor that propelled the Bobcats forward for a win?
I'm going to have to say that Mazzola was not the X factor for this team. Like I mentioned earlier, Eric DeCosta said that he and his team, the coaching staff, everyone, did a lot of soul searching this past week leading up to the Monmouth game. And Jared Mazzola did add to this team, but it was not the X factor. This game against Monmouth got them playing the first way they were in the first 5 games of the season when they went 5-0 and lost that first game against number 9 New Hampshire. But I have reason to believe that they will make a deep run in the MAC playoffs and maybe even win a MAC championship for the first time since 2013.
Yeah, that would be tough. I'm going to have to agree with you with Mazzola not being the X factor. He didn't record a save in the entire game. And when you watch the game in general, you just saw the defense and the offense were playing really aggressively. Julian Gomez, one of the top players in the MAC, he was pretty much held silent throughout the game. And, you know, just overall the team had a bigger spurt and a bigger aggression coming out. And I do think that's what propelled them at the end of the day. Jason Budai, who scored the game-winning goal, got his moment that he's been wanting throughout the season. And I think that showed throughout the season, or throughout that game, for why just overall the team aspect was the main reason that they came away with the win.
And that's where we all.
It was definitely one. Mazzola, like we mentioned, we both agreed that he was not the X factor for the team. But it's one of those things where they, like we keep mentioning, the confidence to build up and going into these last 3 games into the MAC playoffs. It's definitely going to be a big thing for them.
It's time for our last break. Don't go anywhere as we discuss the QBSN Game of the Week, and of course, we have Final Roars. We'll be right back after this.
What do you think you're doing, Kevin?
Was just gonna drive home.
There are several warning signs present that you shouldn't be driving.
Like hearing voices?
Like your text-to-emoji ratio?
Oh man, the selfies.
Selfies. Nailed it. We all have warning signs that let us know that we're probably not okay to drive. Mine is pretending to be your subconscious.
Craig, come on man, let's split a ride home.
If you need to do something to feel okay to drive, you're not okay to drive. Don't drive buzzed.
Welcome back, everyone. Now it's time for Final Roars. John, start us off.
When the MAC preseason awards were announced a week ago today for Quinnipiac, you did not know where they would land and how many players would get recognized. Last year's Quinnipiac women's basketball team saw them fail to hit expectations as the 2 seed of the MAC tournament, as the team lost to Rider 62-50. The MAC Player of the Year, Mackenzie DeWeese, struggled, and the team just could not hang with Rider. However, the team is getting back its top 3 players from last year in DeWeese, Michaela Morris, and Rose Calvary, and now these returning players play a part in Quinnipiac claiming the top seed in the MAC preseason polls, but it always comes down to Fabry for why this team remains dominant no matter the roster turnover. Fabry has led Quinnipiac to 5 MAC championships, 4 undefeated seasons, 8 20-win seasons, a 2016-17 Sweet 16 appearance, and 461 career wins. One of the best coaches of all time, not just in the MAC, in women's basketball, but in the country across all basketball programs. The MAC is so hard to predict, but Quinnipiac is still predicted at the top because of Fabry and the excellence she brings to her team every season.
This past Friday was the men's ice hockey opener against number 6 ranked North Dakota, meeting for the first time since the 2016 national championship game. 7th-ranked Bobcats were playing in the Frank Perotti Junior Arena in front of fans for the first time in 601 days. Being in the student section for my first college hockey game ever, it was an experience like no other. It felt like it was Quinnipiac's version of a football season. The students were going crazy when a goal would be scored and tried imposing their will on the opposing team's goalie while he was down on the student section side for 2 out of 3 periods. Being involved so much in student media my first 2 months of school, I can only imagine what the atmosphere is going to look like when I make my way up to the press row for hockey games in the future. While I am not the biggest hockey fanatic, moving forward I cannot wait to learn more about the sport and see what this team can do this season and in the future with head coach Brand Precknell. I see the Bobcats making a deep run in the MAC Conference and eventually win and make a very deep run in the NCAA tournament because this year, in college hockey, all roads lead to TD Garden in Boston, Massachusetts.
For my final roar, I want to take a moment to hype up the Bobcats women's soccer team. They are coming off a dominant 4-0 victory against the Rider Broncs. They have been on fire all season with an overall record of 11-4, and they are set to take the big stage as they compete in the MAC quarterfinals. The Bobcats are second in goals scored with 37. Rebecca Cook's 12 goals lead the MAC in just 14 games this season, and Selena Salas' 10 assists are tied for first. Not only that, but the Bobcats have allowed the second least amount of goals in the MAC all season, only conceding 11 times in the 15 games. So for that reason, I'm picking the Bobcats to make a deep run in the MAC playoffs, and not only a deep run, but I'm picking them to bring home a MAC championship. I'm going to be in attendance. I hope John and Connor will be as well, and everybody watching. And that's absolutely why I'm picking the women's soccer team to bring home a MAC championship this year. Here first on Bobcat Breakdown. That's all we have for tonight, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to check us out at Q30 Sports on Twitter and Q30TV.com. From the producers, everyone behind the scenes, John and Connor, and myself, your host, Joey O'Donohue, we thank you for tuning in. We wish you a beautiful rest of your Tuesday night and a happy Halloween. Tune in next week.